Module 12, the lymphatic system. Mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, or MALT. The first thing I want to discuss as we look at the immunological defense function of the lymphatic system is MALT. Not the stuff you put in yummy chocolate shakes, but mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. Mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, or MALT for short, is the concentrations of lymphatic tissue without a connective tissue capsule. You see, this type of tissue is found deep to the mucous membranes in the respiratory, digestive, urinary, and reproductive systems. That's because the mucous membranes of all four of these systems have openings to the outside of the body, and thus they're the easiest entry for foreign invaders. So MALT, which sounds like a secret special military force, is located in strategic locations so it can receive foreign invaders. When MALT is not organized tissue, it's called diffuse lymphatic tissue. Diffuse lymphatic tissue is made of scattered lymphocytes, macrophages, and other cells found deep to mucous membranes. It's not very organized, so it has no real boundaries and blends into the surrounding tissue. Sounds like a secret military force, doesn't it? This tissue is deep to mucous membranes, and it's found around lymph nodules and inside the spleen. Lymph nodules are lymphatic tissue arranged into compact, somewhat spherical structures, but without a capsule. So if we were to stain and look at diffuse lymphatic tissue under a microscope, we would see a scattering of purple dots. But lymph nodules look like lots of purple dots surrounded by a ring of an arrangement of more dense purple dots. You'll see this in the next experiment. Module 12, the lymphatic system. Experiment 12.1, histology of a tonsil. We're going to now take a microscopic look at the diffuse lymphatic tissue and lymph nodules of a tonsil. The slide that we're looking at is a human tonsil, and we want to take a look at that under 40 power magnification. Once you get that underneath the microscope, go ahead and focus, and you're looking for the edges, the edge area of that tissue. You're going to see kind of whitish spaces and then edges of tissue. And the edges of the tissue are surrounded by a thin band of cells. Those cells are stained a little bit different color, look a little bit different than the rest of the cells in your sample. And that's the epithelial tissue of the tonsil. So focus in on that and identify that as epithelial tissue. You can even make an illustration of that at this 40 power magnification, labeling the epithelial tissue. Now, the material below the epithelial layer, you should see some large ovals of purple spheres almost filled with purple dots. Take a close look. They're not going to be perfectly outlined, but there will be denser material surrounding those ovals and then lighter material inside of those. You should be able to see one of those and then center that in your microscope and move that up to 100 power magnification. So I'm doing that right now. And then center it again and focus. Okay, once you've focused from that, take a drawing or make a drawing of what you've seen or what you're looking at, including the epithelial tissue, and label those lymph nodules as lymph nodules and the epithelial tissue as well. This is at 100 power magnification, so always identify the magnification under which you're looking at your sample. Now, you want to center the lymph nodule again and take a look at the cells a little more carefully now in the center versus the cells on the outer edges of this nodule. Inside the oval, those cells actually don't look very much different than the cells on the outside of the oval. That's because they're all diffuse lymphatic tissue. The only difference of cells that you're going to see are the cells of the epithelial layer. So the ones inside the lymph nodule, the ones outside, are all pretty much the same kind of cell because they're all the same kind of tissue. Make a drawing at this magnification and label the lymph nodule, the diffuse lymphatic tissue, and if you can have that in your scope of your viewer, also the epithelial tissue. Now, without moving your slide, go ahead and now let's move it to 400 power magnification and focus closer on this diffuse lymphatic tissue. Okay, now at this point, you can see again, there's really more detail of this material, and make an illustration of this at 400 power magnification. Because this is large material we're looking at, we're going to flip back and forth between 100 power magnification and 400 power magnification. So once you've made your illustration, go back to 100 power magnification and focus on some of the cells that are outside of the lymph nodule. So I'm going to move my cell or my slide over a little bit, and we're going to focus on those cells that are outside the lymph nodule and go back to 400 power and refocus again on those cells. Focus in. Okay, now we're looking at diffuse lymphatic tissue again. Draw what you're seeing there, identifying what it is, and notice again that there's very little difference between the inside nodule cells and the outside nodule cells. That's because they're both just lymphatic tissue, the same kind of tissue. The lymph nodules, though, just have that tissue concentrated into an oval shape. We want to go back to 440 power now and refocus because I want to take a closer look at the epithelium. So go ahead and refocus and center your slide on one of the edges of this material. And focus again real quickly. Okay, and then move to 100 power magnification. And focus, center it if you need to. All right, at this point, you can get an idea of what kind of epithelial tissue you're looking at. We studied epithelial tissue way back in a previous module, Module 2. And so go back and take a look at some of the diagrams of the different types of epithelial tissue and see if you can identify what kind of epithelial tissue is in this tonsil material. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and clean everything up and put it away. You can find lymph nodules singly in the body or grouped together in bunches. Your tonsils are really clumps of lymph nodules. Officially called the palatine tonsils, they're made up of lymphoid nodules on each side of your throat. There are lingual tonsils at the base of the tongue, too. What are commonly called your adenoids is again another clump of lymph nodes located in the nasopharynx. All of these nodules are there to help protect the throat. They are strategically located to fight foreign invaders that may enter through the mouth or nose. If you've ever had tonsillitis, you've had an infection of your tonsils. They became enlarged. If this happens often or if you cannot heal from this infection, sometimes it's necessary to have a tonsillectomy and remove them. Tonsillitis often happens in children because their tonsils are actually larger than the tonsils of adults. Tonsils shrink as you mature. Another group of lymphocytes in lymph nodules is called Peyer's patches. These are like tonsils, but they're located in the last third of the small intestine and the appendix. They are again located in a special position to handle foreign invaders that can enter your system. Their job is to keep the good bacteria that live in your large intestine from causing problems in the small intestine.